Hello there, everybody, and welcome back to Ears.
No, I'm still smoking.
You can smoke. Sorry, your terrible habits are being shared with the internet now. Oh, wow, I like that little ring of smoke that just appeared in front of your face. Welcome to the Jazz Club with Benedikt, where we're going to talk about, well, ironically, talking of smoking, we're going to talk about people's voices.
Yay.
Well, the subject came up in regards to vocal effects and to a certain degree actually like auto tune. And this is I probably should get this out of the way first of all because it seems every time like you talk about a song you say, oh, this song's got auto tune. Someone will always jump out of the work and say, that's not auto tune. This is this effect, that effect. Like, okay, any effect that can be used as pitch correction on a voice to basically assure that the voice is in the right tune, or at least it could be a deliberate artistic choice to force the voice into a certain melody using an effect. I think the one example we both know best to use as a middle ground would be passcode. Because passcode, it's part of their sound. They use that vocal effect, and it really sort of pushes their voices in line. Keeps them in a sort of electronic sound. And so I guess the question is how we approach that. Now, I think there's a lot of different opinions to take on board with this, which hopefully we'll explore a fair number of them. First of all is obviously the fact that I did a poll related to this about 4 years ago on my channel, and I was surprised how many people actually responded to the poll saying that actually autotune didn't bother them. I think the options were either I won't listen to music with it in, or I love it, or I just think it's a creative choice and I don't really care either way. And I was surprised how many people were in the latter camp. But
I think it's
yeah,
really hard to say, like in general, because there's like different types of uses for like autotune and pitch effects. You
and
know,
yet when
usually, or like originally, autotune, it was just meant to like do subtle, very subtle corrections on the vocals. And nowadays it's like used to such a high extent that it creates all these weird sounds and effects and these weird step ups and downs when they are like shifting their pitch. And I think that's what is bothering a lot of people. I think a lot of times there is like a bit of autotune or some pitch correction going on and you don't even notice it.
yeah,
But yeah, I think it's the overuse of that bothers a lot of people.
I think it is true that there's a lot of music where to the casual listener they wouldn't even know that it was there. Um, I think that I think that a lot of it is. Obviously, there's always going to be people who just dislike it because of the fact that it is an artificial effect, and some people don't like artificial effects. And I 100% get that. I agree that if you put auto tune
I
onto a
would
voice,
argue if you use it correctly, it won't sound artificial.
okay, but
You won't notice it,
I
or
mean,
you
obviously,
shouldn't.
I guess we're more talking about when people use it in a way where it's being used as an artistic choice. That's kind of what I'm more referring to. Because obviously, if you're using
Yeah.
it subtly, I mean, I guess you could say it's like a lot like CGI in movies. If you're using it subtly, then it shouldn't even be noticed. It's just a tool to help improve something. I mean, some people would object to that and say, well, look, if the person can't do the job, they shouldn't even be in the studio. And again, I wouldn't argue with that 100%. But that's an opinion that I can see. But I personally have no problem against it. And a point I've often used is that when people use auto tune artistically, I think it's a lot like when we first started hearing distorted guitars. It's like, I mean, as any like guitar aficionado will tell you, is distorted guitar does kind of, the more you distort it, the more it can hide your mistakes. And it can do things like that. But effectively it is, and it's a effect that removes a lot of the actual sound of the guitar and replaces it with an artificial sound. And yeah, this is so in a lot of ways it is similar to what auto tune does with the voice. So long as you as a listener believe that it is being used because the person wanted to use it artistically rather than just they did it because they couldn't sing the song, then I think it would be reasonable to see it in a similar light to how we look at distorted guitars. I think the reason why people have more trouble with it is partly because less of us have grown up with it. I think also because we hear voices every day. So hearing a guitar and then hearing a distorted guitar, a guitar is an instrument for creating sound, whereas a voice, I mean, voices sing lyrics, they sing words. We're used to hearing a human sound like a human. So to hear a human not sound like a human is much more uncomfortable for some listeners than hearing a guitar not sound like a guitar.
I'm not sure if you could say if it's actually the distorted guitar. It's more like just the electric guitar, because you could argue, like in the voice, a distorted voice would be a growl or a scream, and not an autotune voice. It's more like an electronic. What do you say? It affects the sound, but it doesn't really. Distort it.
I think if you're looking at it at a purely tonal value, yes. I think the only real metric I'm looking at is, so yes, you'd be right in saying that purely what happens with the tone. Yeah, I think the reason why I would say that the distorted guitar is more similar to the auto tune is because with electric guitar, electric guitar is a completely different instrument. I mean, yeah, you play it with strings, but in all fairness, an electric guitar is as similar to an acoustic guitar as an acoustic guitar is to a ukulele. I mean, it is technically really a different instrument, and the sound of a clean electric guitar, you can still hear you can hear the guitar in its own way. Yes, you're not hearing the wood so much as you're hearing the effect of the pickups, but you are hearing a very clean sound. That's why they call it a clean electric guitar. The distortion is the bit where you affect the sound to deliberately make it sound unnatural. Or you do something where it's the instrument is producing a sound that is kind of outside of it. It's layered on top of the playing almost. I know that could be picked apart, but that's why I feel like the comparison is probably more akin to that. But then, yeah, I know you could see it in lots of different ways, but yeah. So I still, it's that feeling that auto-tune is providing a sound where some people just feel like, okay, I'm not listening to you as a singer anymore. I'm listening to a computer. And I feel like that, similar to like how when distorted guitar first came, and people were like, well, I'm not hearing you play a guitar anymore. I'm just hearing the noise.
Yeah, exactly.
So do you feel there's a comparison with the fact that people feel uncomfortable because it's a human voice and we're not used to hearing a human voice effectively? We want to hear a human voice and feel like it's human. I guess
I wouldn't say. I mean, you just said it's the same for guitar, and people didn't like distorted guitar at first because it's something different, something they are not used to. So yeah, and change, it's always difficult for humans.
But now distorted guitar is probably in more songs than clean guitar. And I don't imagine auto-tune will ever be more prevalent than clean tune, unless AI takes
maybe
up
not
singing.
not autotune in general, but I feel like vocal production, I would say, will increase. And yeah, I was talking with someone about a similar thing in my comments recently, and I think I said it's more like because we're arguing about that a lot of groups nowadays add electronic elements and synths on top of their music. And if that is a good thing, and not just the vocals, but just the whole music in general. And I was wondering if it was just more like the natural evolution, because now technically it's pretty easy to add stuff like that to your music. It's not like a huge undertaking. And so it's kind of, if you have a group of 5 people and everyone is like busy doing their stuff, playing their instruments, like what can you still do to add to your music? And I think the obvious choice nowadays, you add some electronic effects.
That's interesting. So kind of it's just like, yeah, it's an opportunity to do something a bit different. Yeah, I guess I mean, like we were saying,
Just an option, I would say, an easy option to add something to your music.
well, I think that's the important word,
So
though, when you say the
why not?
easy option, because I mean, it's not. I don't know if it necessarily would be considered adding something to your music as
I
changing
mean,
something, because I mean, it's still a voice, but it's an opportunity to do something different. I think easy is the important word, and I think that goes to the crux of why a lot of people are bothered. Are people
well,
doing
it
it
doesn't
because
have to
it's
be easy.
well, yeah,
It can
exactly.
you can have a lot of like very intricate electronic editing
I mean, it doesn't have to be easy, but I do think I think in the same, we were talking about AI the other day, and we were talking about the fact that a lot of people, the reason why they dislike AI is because of the feeling that it's and I can see this is that the removal of it takes some things away from the humanity of various things, and I use AI for things, but I can see that there is always a line that has to be drawn, and I think that that's the interesting thing is that when we say about auto tune being easy, I do wonder whether it's one of those things where if it's being done because it's easy, if that's too much at the center, then that's when people would be like, well, yeah, that's when we don't want to use it. Whereas if it's being used because someone's legitimately saying, look, I think this sounds better than me just singing it clean. I think this just works with the tone of the song. We were talking about two different Scandal songs. I was thinking of Saisho Heiki Kimi, the hardest of all the Scandal songs to say. And that song, I remember when that premiered and we were all like waiting for the YouTube video to come out, and that was like 2 or 3 years ago. But it came out and it was like had a bit of a synth like thing going on in it. It was heavy, it was very colourful, and it had this heavy auto-tuned Haruna vocal, and a lot of people were unsure about that. And I really liked it because for me, it just worked with what the song was. Like the song was a little bit digital. It was a little bit, had a little bit of that heavy production kind of 80s synth thing going on in places. But then I've heard her use it in other songs where I was just like, do you need it here? Why is it here?
Yeah, that's, I think, yeah, it's very important. Like if it's like necessary or matching, fitting for the sound of the music, because we mentioned Passcode before. That's just, it's like everywhere. It's in every song. It's part of their sound, like you said. But because the Scandal song I wanted to talk about was Electric Girl, which when I first heard it, also in the context of Honey, which was very, there weren't any effects like that before on that album. I feel sounded pretty raw in parts, and then you have that song and it just didn't really work for me. It felt out of place suddenly having these weird vocals. But then in retrospective, I kind of looked at that song again and I was like, Electric Girl. Okay. Yeah, I kind of get it now. And that actually made the song better for me. So I think, it really depends on the intention, why you use it.
Well, I guess you've also actually made an interesting point there about context, because did you feel in the context of the album it added like something having that little bit of variation? I mean, on its own you might look at it and go, not sure about that.
It does add variation. For my personal taste, it didn't really work. Just I don't know. It felt, like I said, it felt out of place for me.
Talking of PASSCODE, though, 'cause you briefly mentioned PASSCODE. As you say, it's like it's very much in their core sound. It's part of their identity, and like I think like PASSCODE's whole sound is built on this sort of like weird. I want to say like glitch core, but someone's going to argue that that's a real thing and it's not actually that. But it's basically sort of weird.
It's very electronic music.
Yeah, it's got a lot of electronic sounds in there.
I feel like that's also a reason why it does work better for PASSCODE. Because Scandal, to me, it was a rock group, and then they suddenly had like rock music with these weird effects on it.
Yeah, I guess when you've got all the other instruments sounding really pure, and then like this auto-tune vocal comes in, it sounds out of place, which is why actually that's a good point. Since Saisho Heiki Kimi, I think the whole thing that stops it sounding out of place is that like synth sound in there. If it wasn't for that sort of synthetic sound throughout the instrumentation, then it wouldn't work. Whereas like you say, in a more standard rock song, it doesn't work. Silent Siren, who I like, I know you don't know this song, but they had a song called Alk Monster, which was, I don't know, on paper it worked, but then like I just they did it with auto because the bassist was singing, and she's actually quite a good singer. I don't know if the point when this song came out whether she was as good as she eventually became, but like she was singing through auto tune and it just sounded awful. And the song was really good, but this like auto tune thing just killed the song. And I saw them play it live, and it was It was just terrible. I mean, she clearly wasn't singing well with it. It just, the whole thing was awful hearing, and she was doing it auto-tune
Did
live
they
as
use
well.
the same effect live, or
Yeah,
did
yeah.
they leave it out? Okay.
She had like the microphone auto-tune thing, and it just
Hmm.
sounded awful. You know, it was clearly was like it just wasn't working. But I mean, it was clearly part of the song. But then I've heard her sing another song subsequently with the bassist who she's actually got quite a good voice. So it was. I think that was an artistic decision that didn't work. But then again, actually, Silent Siren have another song called Knife, where the lead singer she sings through auto-tune. And that has quite a hard melody, which always made me think whether that was part of it. But I think the auto tune works really well on that because it's got this bit in the chorus where the voice goes da 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 da, da. And it's like that bit between the two notes.
Yeah, yeah. It's always that shifting that sounds just unnatural.
I feel like they deliberately did it because that da 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 da, I think it gives it this kind of weird off kilter, slightly weird feel hearing that coming through an auto tune, and I feel that's really deliberate with them. Because again,
Yeah, you
Silent
can
Siren
use
don't.
it in a, like very deliberate, like you say. But I feel like that's also what groups like Passcode or Miscast, things like that, are doing a lot. Um, if that's to your personal taste is another question. But I mean, it does
Yeah,
sound very artificial, I would agree. But I would also say that's kind of the what they want. That's the sound they are going for.
it's interesting how you and I, at the beginning of this conversation, we sort of worked our way past the basic fact, past that opening area where like you lose half the audience, which is the people who just don't feel it's natural, and we've worked on to the place of okay, now we've accepted that look, it's just a tool. When does it work? And I think we've come to the sort of semi conclusion that it's like if the rest of the instrumentation suits it. Um, and I do think
Let
that's
me
a
ask you about one song, because there, think the fan base at first wasn't also really wild about. BMC by Baby Metal. They kind
oh
of use like that auto-tuney effect on it, but you have to say the live version, it sounds. I think they don't even use the effect on the lives, but it sounds really great. And I also don't perceive it as something that would, I don't know, throw me off.
you know, I saw a live video of it once because I know it's not one
Like
they
an
play often.
enhancement.
Yeah, and I didn't really sort of focus in on that, and I wish I had now. BMC, I know I'm a little bit in the minority on this, but not as much as I thought originally. But I actually really like BMC because partly, again, because contextually it contrasts from a lot of what they've done before, and it leans into a type of hip hop, a slightly more contemporary type of hip hop that is not also one that a lot of people like. It's not just going for sort of like a safe, like early 90s style of like simple rhythm hip hop that it's going for that sort of like burst of vocals and the weird sort of like thing on the vocals. I don't know how
I know.
much of that was
Yeah.
her throwing her voice and how much of that was computer aided. I never
That's
really
the thing. A lot of people at first, when they heard the song, the studio version first, they were like that, all that, that endings that she throws in. That yeah, they
I,
will never play that song live because it wouldn't work. And then you hear it live, and like, oh damn, it does work.
yeah, I've got to be honest. I'm intrigued because, like, when you mentioned BMC, I was like, "Oh, good, we're talking about BMC," but I wasn't 100% sure. I was trying to think, where is the auto tune in that? Because again, that I think would come under the subtlety area because I agree that that could have been aided by subtle auto tune. But if anyone thinks that it's just like a very obvious that pitch shift is being done by a computer, I don't think so. But then again, that might be more because I'm familiar. I've heard that done in hip hop songs before. I know that sort of thing where you throw your voice into off pitch is a stylistic thing, and I've heard it done by other artists, and so I know it's a thing that is done. It's not, you don't need a computer to do that. I guess that should be obvious, but I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if someone hasn't heard that done before. It's not common anyway, so I mean, I'd be understandable if someone thought that was weird.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I
when
think I can also get it because if you have like someone who can really sing really well, like live without any effects, and then they put out like songs where the voice is all, yeah, changed up and artificialized, however you want to call it, you cannot even hear like the natural voice quality anymore. then yeah, I get it. I don't like that as well. I would rather hear the natural voice. But yeah, like we established, it can be very well be enhancing and like used as a tool, depending on the degree or like how you use it.
I am going to step slightly to one side with a comparison. Now, this is a Western comparison, but I just want to, because there might be some people who are watching this who might know, as we're talking a little bit about this, they might know this comparison. They might have heard this before. There was a fairly well known, I guess you call him like a singing rapper in America by the name of T-Pain, who wear a big top hat all the time. Very strange looking fella. Very jolly fella, but always doing his like singing style of rapping, and his whole sound was like really, really super auto-tuned. And I think he was the first one who kicked into gear this awful tradition that has now come about of like these auto-tuned rappers. I think he was one of the first ones to do that. Although
That I think is awful.
yeah, it's one of the
The
worst
worst.
things ever. And I despise auto tune rap, but I will say that he was at a point where it was just kind of a weird gimmick when he did it, and I don't think he wasn't plumbing the sort of depths that we see nowadays with that. But the reason I bring that up is because
Just couldn't sing and try to fix it up.
well, this is the thing. From what I've heard, apparently, I think I did actually hear some recordings. I don't know if they were genuine, but I'm pretty sure they were. He actually sings pretty well. He's actually got a pretty good singing voice. It was a complete stylistic thing. It was completely done as a stylistic thing. I guess you could say, "Cher, do you believe in love?" kind of thing. Or I don't know how good a singer she is anymore, but like, is she still alive? I have no idea. But I mean, the thing is that like apparently he was doing it completely like that, and so like a lot of people were understandably like, dude, you can sing, just sing. So yeah, I think there's actually some people who probably would be like have that feeling as well of just like, but if you can sing, why not? And that comes back to this thing again. It's like if you using auto tune, I think in a way the audience wants to trust that you're doing it solely as an effect. Yeah, and I think that's how people feel when they hear passcode. It sounds so natural that they just like, yes, that is obviously intentional. So this is obviously not a slander on their ability to sing. This is not a cop out. They want to use it. And that, I think that's why people are more concerned when they hear it in stuff like Scandal, because they're like, well, hold up, but you can sing. Why are you doing this?
Would you
Yeah.
say it's really about the pitch shift, or is it just like vocal effects in general?
Well, I was focusing more on the pitch shift side of stuff, or the pitch correction, as I think the
So you
better
would
term to
say,
use is.
in your opinion, like people are more lenient in general on vocal effects, just certain extreme ones, I guess.
Well, interesting you mentioned that because I would say as a general, yes. I think people rile against the auto tune, the pitch correction thing because of the fact that it feels like a cop out, and I think because so many people have heard the Western comparison where you get people like those fucking auto tune rappers where it's just used without any sense, or people who are like using it to avoid actually having to sing. So I think people are jaded against it and don't like it for other reasons. But you mentioned about vocal effects. I didn't even think about this until I read a comment. I think it was under Shambles by BAND-MAID. Some people were talking about Psyche's use of this like distorted effect that she does actually use. I think it's
Yeah.
increasingly common in the verses where she has that sort of distorted like megaphone style voice.
Mhm.
And it does take away a bit of the tone. It never bothered me. It never even occurred to me. It just always sounds so natural when it happens that it never bothered me. But then someone read it in the comments, and I read it. I was like, yeah, actually, they use it a lot more than other bands do. I was like, oh, that actually is true. That's a thing band may lean into quite a lot. But it never bothered me because it just sounded like. I guess that would be nearer to the comparison of the way you were describing the guitar's distortion of voices. Um, yeah, that and it never bothered me because she still sounds like her. She just sounds like her with a little bit of a effect layered on. Still feels like she's the one creating the sound. She's the one creating the voice. You can still hear the inflection of her voice. Um,
Yeah, I feel that's a very important thing, though. And I can understand people feeling like that takes away from that raw or naturalness.
Yeah.
Because I have the same with I'm currently listening to the Fuki solo project, and I'm like sometimes there's like a lot of doubling on the voice, and
Yeah.
I'm thinking to myself, I actually love vocal harmonies, so I'm kind of wondering, like, why don't I like this so much? And I'm thinking, her voice, it doesn't sound as I'm used to, like from Unlucky Morpheus, for example, because there it's just her raw, powerful voice, probably some effects also, but it's not as apparent. And I feel like this doubling, like her natural or the thing that I like about her voice actually gets lost a bit just through too many layers and effects.
There there are there are the there are a lot of the effects we're used to. I mean, like we almost expect reverb. Obviously, some degree of
Yeah,
compression on the vocal. For those who aren't familiar,
that's
compression
also
isn't just
not
something.
really like, I wouldn't say it's significant enough that you will notice it.
I will just say for anyone who isn't aware, compression is not just something that's done on an entire track. It's almost always done on the individual instruments as well before they're mixed together. Just for anyone who doesn't know that. Yeah, but yeah, like reverb, compression, these things are normal. And then other little effects will appear that are kind of ones we're used to. The doubling is an interesting one because, like you say, doubling is something that sounds kind of unnatural, and that's again for anyone who doesn't know, that's where you record the same thing twice and you put it smack on top of each other. And this was a very common thing, certainly about 15 years ago in the West. I think it still is common with a lot of places. I think around the turn of millennium, it was
I
extremely
mean, it's
common.
also done on the instrument parts a lot.
Well, this is what I was going to say. Is like most of
Yeah.
the like heavy rock bands you hear, where they got like that really thick sounding guitar. Usually, what you think is one guitar is actually a recording of. I mean, sometimes it can be loads. It can be like 5 or 6 layers of the exact same guitar line.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, it doesn't sound like that. And it's because they take all of them and then they run them through like like all the either compress them
Yeah.
together or
And
they
also it
run
will
them
be
through the
like
amplifier
panned.
together.
It's playing the same thing, but
Yeah.
you have like 70% on the right and 30 on the left. And then you had another layer of that same thing doing the same thing the other way around. But there's still like very subtle differences. You cannot just copy the
I
music. The very subtle differences used. It
I
just
think
makes the sound really full. But
not
apparently not always for the vocals.
not to I don't want to be too finicky here, but I will just say that in my opinion, if you get layers and you split them on the pan, then it does, even maybe not to the casual listener, it does still sound like two guitars then. So I would say in that particular instance, that I would do feel is a bit different. I'm more thinking about when you layer and you deliberately run them through as one sound in the you combine those recordings
I think
into
it's
and
done more
treat them as
often than
one.
you think, especially in metal. It's most of the time it's like 3 times the same thing,
No, no,
panned differently.
I mean, I mean, I'm just saying this from personal experience, like in like studios. I know what you mean, but I think the end effect when it's panned out, it is more noticeable. I mean, if you get two, if you pan left and right, two recordings, it sounds like two guitars playing the same thing. Whereas if you run them as layers on top of each other, it tends to sound like a attempt to just smooth out one recording. But yeah, I mean, I know what you mean. But yeah, I just wanted to more draw that distinction because a lot of the time with vocals tend to be, they tend not to pan them obviously because the vocal usually lands in the center anyway. But yeah, so I mean, basically with layering, it's a surprise. It's less common now than it was about 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago. But vocal layering is still a thing. Um, and
I think a lot of times it also works, but
yeah,
the same thing, if you overuse the effect, then it's, yeah, can be too much.
but you said it was a bit too much with the Fuki album. The
Yeah.
uh, um, did
It still sounds good. It's something different, but I personally think it takes away from the best thing, like the power that I get from Fuki in other of her projects.
I mean, she's so tight on her vibrato. I wonder if she's doubled her vibrato because that would be pretty impressive if she's doubled her vibrato perfectly. Yeah, no, she's one of those singers. She doesn't need it though. Like again, her voice is so powerful. I can't imagine why she would need it. Although she does the very theatrical music where you'd expect effects to be fair game. But It's
And especially in a like spooky solo project, I would expect
yeah.
like the vocals, really the raw vocals being the focus, but apparently not.
You went for a Fuki solo project and you ended up with two Fukis. Is it a solo project or is it a self duet album?
Spooky clone
Ah,
project.
the Fuki clone project. Oh, don't tell Neon; he'd be too excited. He might try and kidnap one. But yeah, no, the Fuki's voice are amazing. So it just kind of like shocks me the idea of even doing that. But yeah,
It's
no.
still
Then
very good.
again, yeah, I'm not surprised. I am surprised, and then I'm retrospectively not surprised. But yeah, so the vocal doubling I can kind of understand, but yeah, it all comes onto the point of the one line that a lot of people draw on the sand is pitch correction. So we'll take anything, but just pitch correction is when a lot of people will like say, "Oh, that's where it got too far."
But what do you think of pitch shifting then? Like, songs where I'm thinking about Future Funk again, where you have these
I thought you were going to say
just
Nightcore.
the whole vocal line is pitched up and it sounds like, Mickey Mouse voices or something.
I I mean, the reason why I'm okay with that is because this is one of those things where I think there's more of a
But you can
sliding.
always also shift downwards, of course.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is where there's a sliding scale thing because ultimately it's still the same vocal talent, even if it. Let me give an example. If I got a recording of a song you didn't know, I played it to you and I played it at 101% speed, you might notice something was wrong, but you probably wouldn't. And then 102, 103, 105. What is the exact point that you would notice something was wrong? And the reason you wouldn't
Yeah, it's a good question.
is because there isn't really something wrong until it sounds unnatural. Because the thing is that it is still the vocal performance. So, in my opinion, in the same way that, I mean, if someone played a record too fast, very old school reference, if someone played a record too fast, you wouldn't go, oh, that song's ruined now. You just hear it as different. So for me, I think if you pitch shift a voice, I can understand the listener saying I don't like that because it sounds unhuman, but I don't think it detracts from the performance. The performance is still the performance. You're still getting the same
Interesting.
performance. Yeah,
I mean, I don't have anything against it either, but I would say it definitely changes the performance, or at least what you can perceive of that performance. But again,
yeah.
yeah,
You
absolutely depends on the degree, like how much is it? Because yeah, like very subtle, you probably won't notice it, but very, yeah, extreme, it's absolutely noticeable, and it can completely change, I think, the feeling of a whole song. There's even like a very, like a scene of it, I don't know how that's called exactly, like Nightcore or something,
That's what
where
I was talking
everything
about
is
earlier.
just
Yeah, Nightcore. Yeah,
slowed down, I don't know,
sped up.
100%, and a lot of reverb on it and stuff like that.
Yeah, so Nightcore is usually like sort of, I think it's like between 130 and 170% is usually what they consider to be Nightcore. There is actually some proper like area that they put it in, but the thing is that I do accept that you okay. So if you say that, I do accept that like if you don't time correct, which with something like Nightcore you don't, you
Mm.
speed it up and you pitch shift it, and the speed increase goes hand in hand rather than trying to correct one with the other. Which is also the best way to preserve the original sound quality because you're just running the exact same sound quicker rather than trying to fill in the gaps in the
Yeah,
waveform.
yeah,
But yeah, sorry. The point is that if you do that, I understand because it's coming quicker, you might miss some of the intricacies but they're still technically there.
exactly.
But so I think for me, all of the intricacies are still there. But I think maybe where I would support what you're saying is because the minute it starts sounding unnatural, it becomes harder to relate to. Like if you hear someone singing and there's like a little crack, an emotional crack in their voice or something, you can kind of hear it and relate to it because it sounds human. But then when you go into Nightcore, like any little intonation in the voice, because it sounds unhuman, it's hard to relate to it. It's hard to perceive the emotion as well because it doesn't sound human anymore. Which I think, interestingly enough, would therefore, as I suspect you were doing, build a bridge back to what people's complaint is with auto tune and sort
Yeah,
of heavy
yeah.
pitch things. But I think the differences between like a night chord voice and a and auto tune is that in auto tune those things have actually been taken away, whereas in night chord they've been masked by the fact it's quicker. So, for example, if you just listen to like night chord for the entire day, then it'll start to sound natural. I suspect by the end of the day you'll start to really pick up on it because it's like that. None of the none of those things have been destroyed. They've just been recontextualized as being faster. All the same feelings and everything is still there. It's just quicker now. So I think you could just like speed up your brain and eventually get into sync with it and just hear it with exactly the same emotion and quality and feeling.
I mean, let us know if you're listening to Nightcore.
Yeah,
How do you feel about that?
I had a little bit of a
Because
phase
yeah,
of listening to some of it.
to me, it's like the point when it starts to sound like something else, like not the natural voice anymore. And I think, yeah, what you said about sounding unhuman, I think a big problem about pitch shifting, even in slight, yeah, to a very low degree, can be problematic because, like you said, it takes away those subtleties and just like flattens out the sound and makes it sound really boring. That's actually one thing I have, like, my biggest problem about pop music, that a lot of it sounds very like it has no edge, like just there's no edge to it, and that also for me removes any interesting quality that's to the sound, because it's just something it just goes by without influencing me in any way,
I
and
would
that's boredom to me.
I would yeah I would argue that could be leveled at any genre. You have the singers in any genre who sing with a emotional intensity, and the ones who sing like it's coming off a conveyor belt. I think that's true in all genres. But
Yeah.
yeah, I understand why that would be something that would be quite easy to perceive in pop, because there's a lot of pop singers in the mainstream areas, at least, who are just trying to be the perfect karaoke singer and sing with that sort of session musician style voice. I wanted to throw one thing back at you though. Not as a rebuttal, more out of
A
interest.
quick one, because we have to call it quits soon.
Oh, sorry. Okay, yes, yeah. I forgot we're nearly out of time. Yeah, we are out of time. All right, just a quick thing. So we said that auto tune can work in a song that sounds kind of digital. It sounds like it's supposed to be synthetically affected. How would you feel then if there was a punk song where the entire intention was to play fast, and the vocals were recorded and then deliberately sped up to match the backing? So basically, the guitars were all being played at 180 BPM, but the vocal was recorded at 120 and then sped up to match. So you have like a nightcore style vocal over a organically recorded punk rock song.
Like with a typical original sounding punk rock sound.
Yeah, so the backing and everything is just being played as normal. The vocal is the only thing being affected. So the vocalist went into the studio, recorded the song in like a slower tempo in their normal voice, and then it was sped up to meet the tempo of the rest of the instruments, thereby giving it a nightcore sound. But it was all intentional. That was the design. How would you feel about that?
I mean, again, coming back to future funk, there's a lot of that. Like this, the music sounds like it's the normal speed, and then the vocals sound like someone sped it up. So I think it could work for a punk song as well. I mean, it's hard to imagine, but
I think that's an experiment.
has no one ever done that before?
I'm sure someone must have done it, but I'm certainly going to give that a go. I think I'm going to have a little bit of fun and sit around and maybe do that in my little home setup, record something like that, and maybe sing some lines at a
I
slower
would like
speed.
to hear it.
All right, I'll give that a go, mate.
I think it could work very well. Yeah.
I'm going to
Sure.
do that for a
Why not?
future Ears to the East episode. You heard it here. I'm going to do that. I'm going to try and deliver that. There you go. Anyway, Benedikt, yes, you did say we've been doing a long session today, and I know you've got to go, so I'm going to let you go, fella.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's actually been really interesting. This has been one of our nice little chilled out. I mean, you were smoking at the beginning. I feel this conversation should have all been done with cigars and like saxophone music in the background and just like a jazz club. Look, dude, absolute pleasure. We'll say goodbye to everyone. Get in the comments, tell us your thoughts on all these subjects. I know it's a contentious issue, but it's always when we have good conversations about what we did in the past, and I'm sure we will again. And until we hopefully see you for the next one of these, remember to keep your ears to the east.